Do you feel like economists are kind of in their own lane and the rest of the sciences are like, whatever, you do stuff over there, it's your thing?
No, economists are a little bit different. Economists aren't so much in their own. Economists are trying to march into every field they can get into.
Nice.
real vein of economic imperialism. So there is actually a really big, there's a massive number of, say, health economists, and I'm sure many of them think about immunology and that kind of stuff. So it's probably there. Like I'm definitely not anywhere near having a lot of depth of knowledge or being near the frontier, but yeah, there's certainly there. One thing that this is pretty a gross generalization, but economists, they love being imperialists, they love marching into new areas. They're not always that great at working with the people in those areas. They're much more likely to sort of march in and go, our way of thinking and working is much more thorough and rigorous than your harebrained sort of way of thinking about the world. And so quite often, it's probably not hugely collaborative, and they wind up talking past each other a lot of the time.
Well, that seems to be the case with any two groups of specialized human beings. They always think that they have the best answer. It seems like, I suppose it's not totally unique.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of exceptions.
But you did mention that you were I think you mentioned it, or I put it in your mouth accidentally, about this evolutionary analogy to the way that economics is pursued, and in terms of like satisfying our needs and how the science itself is evolving. And I feel like there are some basic biological principles at play that have to necessarily reach into the economic domain.
They do, but I think that there is the technological difficulty of, okay, so let's say we have an evolutionary need for socialization. Is it enough to replace regular socialization with listening to a podcast or sitting in a vat where you're connected to the metaverse? Like, will that be enough? And if you can base economic theory on evolutionary biology and be like, well, that'll be enough and people will still be satisfied, will that then force a nudge into a direction that maybe isn't actually utilitarian?
Yeah. Well, just on that first part of your comment there about the technological side, throwing it off. So I read a paper, published it in 2015, where with a friend of mine, Lionel Page, we basically took the evolutionary angle and tried to put it into some fertility projections, where we said let's add a bit more of evolutionary biology into at least one framework. And so every 2 years, United Nations puts out these world population prospects, sort of population projections to 2100. And what we did is we just threw into their models the heritability of fertility. So fertility tends to be heritable. So it's from twin studies, I guess even other genomic studies now using relatedness, but basically the idea, if you have more children, then your children are more likely then to have more children, and so on, sort of, I guess, keeping other things constant. But so anyway, in that paper, we sort of said, we expect, because fertility is heritable, those who have more children now will form a greater part of the population. We expect a fertility rebound. And I just got I have no faith in that conclusion anymore. Like at the time, I was kind of like a little bit equivocal. I just have zero faith now because of that very thing where I'm going, yes, people have this drive to reproduce. Fertility is heritable. But again, you suddenly introduce whatever else is coming over the next 10, 20 years. And is it just going to completely, is it going to fulfill that need without people actually having to have children? And so in that same way, that socialization, like to the extent it comes through podcasts or we get even better technology for having socialization, does it simply, in some ways, completely fulfill that need, that evolutionary need, that need, perhaps, for social belonging, whatever that proximate goal is that leads to ultimate reproductive success way back then? Does it get met by this new technology? And so I become really loath to say, we're going to see certain, what the future will look like, given that, that uncertainty and the different ways that, perhaps our proximate objectives can be met.
Yeah, you never could have predicted that having children would be a cost as opposed to a benefit in the past, right? I mean, if you had a farm or something, all you need is bodies out there in the field, and you want people to, help you build the barn.
And even when you have industrialization and you're still on the farm, but your children are in the city, they're sending remittances back to the countryside. If you're an immigrant, you send your children, you kind of like cast them into the future, and you put them into a place where they're going to do better than you. And there's always this idea that the children will provide for you. But if there is a shift where all of a sudden children are just a perpetual money pit, as opposed to the other way around, that's a shift.
They grow up, they turn 18, they
like,
move
I hate
away.
you.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah. But that's that point you're making, though, it's kind of interesting, like, because you're almost describing it like an economist in some ways. It's like, and I'm there going, part of me goes, well, where are children in the utility function? Like, surely children, like, there's something there, and it's kind of interesting that in the end it does become that the cost thing becomes such a major driver, as opposed to simply going, my God, like, look at my kids, and like, there's no amount of money that would ever replace that, at least in my head. I guess.
Well, maybe like 2 kids for you, right? But you don't need to have 15, right? I mean, it's, I don't know. It's like, I'm not saying that economics is the only thing that matters in people's decision making at that point. But it certainly might scale the matter, I wonder. At least it seems to, in my experience, among people I know who are having children, it seems to at least temper the decision.